It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. There's been a lot made of what is going on our college campuses across the country. And so we've seen time and time again. I documented some for you last night, and I've been documenting some of this for you this morning as well, of these students that have been out there. You know, they've been protesting Israel. They've been in support of Palestine, which, you know, for a lot of folks, if you support Palestine, then you are supporting Hamas. Whether that's fair or not is up for debate. But, you know, the point is that the American people are absolutely shocked by what we're seeing on these college campuses. Listen to this. Billionaires who have pumped $500 million into these Ivy League schools have now backed out over their failure to condemn the Hamas terror attacks in Israel. Harvard and UPenn, they both face losing hundreds of millions of dollars in future endowments. By the way, you know who has a very big connection to UPenn? Yeah, Joe Biden. That's right. So you've got UMass, you've got Harvard, you've got UPenn, you've got some of these other colleges as well. And last night, we told you the story of these athletes who are, you know, used to play for these colleges, and they've been calling out their alma mater. Now we do have these billionaires who have also been giving to these Ivy League schools, and now they're saying, no, we're not going to give to a school that refuses to condemn these terror attacks. They say up to $487 million could be lost amid rising tensions between Israel and Palestine. See, that's what's going to happen here in America. Well, that is what is going on here in America. Is you have two very specific sides. You are either pro-Israel, anti-Hamas, or you are anti-Israel and pro-Hamas and pro-Palestine. Now, I do understand, again, that there is a debate going on where if you are out there and you're protesting Israel and, you know, you're gathering in support of Palestine and you say free Palestine, okay. But what about condemning Hamas? And so there's a lot of people that I believe are looking at this debate and they're saying, if you don't condemn Hamas, well, then you're obviously for Hamas. Now, I'm going to tell you, you know, if the people on the left, right, they always like to say that Donald Trump and his supporters, they're just a bunch of Nazis. Okay. So I will tell you, as a conservative, if a group did heinous things to other people, whatever, but we happen to have some of the same viewpoints, I would absolutely still condemn that group for doing heinous things, regardless as to whether or not we had other viewpoints in common. And so my question is, as we watch these, all these rallies in support of Palestine, has there also been, as people are screaming, free Palestine, okay, can we talk about condemning Hamas? Because I think that those people who want to chant free Palestine would go a long way, maybe, just maybe, in garnering some support if they did throw in the occasional condemnation of a terrorist group that murdered well over 1,000 innocent people weekend before last. But you see, the Free Palestine people, they can't do that. And so, to me, I don't know how you can look at the carnage. And I told you yesterday that I had been spending the weekend watching some of these videos that were filmed by Hamas and put up on social media, where they broke into homes and they shot people at point-blank range. They did awful things. There's a story out there that I didn't really cover it tonight because I feel like I did enough of that story yesterday. But there is a story out there, and it is a story that is really directed towards people who I guess there's folks out there that are doubting the savagery of Hamas and what they did to those Israelis and those Israeli families when they killed all of these innocent people. And so what they're saying, and these are the doctors and, some of the people who had to, clean up, if you will, in Israel. And they're saying, if you have any doubt, the coroners in Israel, if you have any doubt as to the butchery of what happened, come talk to us. Read our words. Listen to what we are saying. If you're somebody who is doubting that this actually happened, or if it's somebody that is doubting at how bad this was bad. This was bad. And there was some debate amongst conservative circles, I guess, where the media participated in it too. This whole conversation about whether or not babies were actually beheaded. And I told my Nashville audience because, this was something that was being discussed. And my position was, I'm horrified at this whole thing. So whether or not, these children were mutilated or were shot, I can't be any more horrified. Whether they were mutilated or whether they were shot, it's to me, it's all equally as horrifying. So, there were people actually saying, well, it's not nearly as bad. They weren't really beheaded. Are you kidding me, really? Is that your official take? Because there were some people that were sort of intimating or dancing around to that effect. To me, I can't be horrified anymore, regardless as to how these kids died. And so when you look at what's going on at these Ivy League schools with all of these rallies to support Palestine, the Palestinians, the question is, how much condemnation are we seeing with Hamas? And I'm not seeing a whole heck of a lot. Now, if I didn't fear for my life and my safety and the safety of my family, I would wade into one of those here in Nashville, and I would ask the question, do you condemn Hamas? And do you condemn what they did? I would hope that many would. But there seems to be some debate out there. Anyway, $500 million is what some of these schools are going to end up losing. Billionaires Ken Griffey and others have called for Harvard to take a robust stance in defense of Israel and criticize students defending the Hamas attack. We had quite a bit of a great conversation earlier about this, earlier in the program here on Red Eye Radio, where I was talking about just this, where some of these students, they're awfully young. 18, 19, 20 years old, but they are adults. But the question is, as you have a lot of these CEOs, and they're wanting to find the names of these students so that they can make sure that they don't hire these students, like ever. One of the questions that's out there is that really fair to hold these young adults accountable for their comments and signing on to this, anti-Israeli paper? And that's going to be something that is going to follow them their entire lives if their names get out. And by the way, their names did get out. And so then we have the conversation, is that fair? And I related to you when I was far younger, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-ish, I was extraordinarily liberal. I was pro-choice. I was all about open borders. And I explained that I was really rebelling against my father, who was a conservative. And so I myself would be horrified if anyone found one of the papers that I wrote in high school where I was more than likely defending abortion. And so there's some that are saying, though, that it is unfair to hold these students to their words now when they may change their mind in 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. But you know there's a difference. And we talked about this with many listeners who called in, and I asked the opinions of the folks that were listening. Because there is a difference between being, pro-choice, which is by and large, although we could make, several different arguments here, but ultimately that is a political issue. That is a political position that you take. You either take, the position of being pro-choice or pro-life. I could say that it's more of a religious thing, but whatever. We can debate that, but we can debate, open borders versus closed borders. I mean, but these are all, conversations that, people have been having for years. But you can't defend what happened in Israel. You just can't. And so if somebody is 19 years old and they ultimately criticize Israel and basically say, yeah, this was Israel's fault, they had it coming, free Palestine, all that kind of stuff. Can you hold a 55-year-old, many, many years from now, can you hold a 55-year-old of the future responsible for what they may have, written down or signed on to, here in 2023? If somebody said, yeah, free Palestine, Israel deserved it, Hamas, they're freedom fighters. If somebody's 19 and in, 30 years, 40 years, whatever from now, that comes back to haunt them. Okay, well, you know what? You have to take responsibility. Because there is no gray area. There is no acceptable, at least to me, there is no acceptable opinion when it comes to supporting Hamas and blaming Israel for the attacks. There is none. I mean, that's not about, political parties. That is about murder and the killing of innocents. And you always have to condemn the killing of innocents, regardless of what side that you're on. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. So these colleges, they're not going to get, and you know what, with these endowments, they don't really need a lot of this money. However, they are going to end up losing upwards of $500 million. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
The Consumer Price Index shows that during September, prices came down for several food categories, one of which is cereal and bakery products. Now, if you do the grocery shopping, you already know this.
Cereal and bakery products are one of the categories that we've seen with the most persistent price growth over the last few years.
Persistent, relentless price hikes month after month. However, USDA economist Megan Schweitzer says during September, those cereal and bakery product prices went down 0.3%.
And that's the first time prices have declined for this category since August of 2021.
So now maybe that's a sign of things easing up. However, even though prices dropped a little bit last month,
prices for cereal and bakery products are still up 4.8% since last year.
That's on average for the whole category. Some products have seen much bigger price hikes. For example, crackers are costing 6.9% more than this time a year ago. White bread about 8% more. Gary Crawford reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 86690 Red Eye is the phone number, 86690 Red Eye, and it's 907-3339. And you can find out more about me on the Dan Mandis Show Facebook page, and I'm also on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as well. And this is interesting because I was talking about this story regarding the colleges and how they're going to lose, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars from donations from, their graduated students, endowments and this kind of a thing. And so now you've got individuals and companies that are pulling those endowments because of all of these anti-Israel protests or the pro-Palestinian rallies that are going on. So there's a story out there today, and I want to finish this up. I was telling you about this guy named David Duell. He is the CEO for a company called Easy Health, and he is saying now that these Harvard students that were out there blaming Israel for the attacks, they need to pay a price. And so what he did, he actually got a hold of this paper, and he leaked the list of students who were advocating for the death and the destruction of the Jewish people. This was a conversation that was had on Fox News, and it was a really intriguing conversation. And David Duell appeared with Neil Cavuto, and they talked about a number of different things, including why Duell did what he felt like he had to do, which was tell other CEOs who these students were. Listen.
My family fled their homeland of Iran over 2,000 years due to the Islamic Revolution in 1979. The Persian Jewish community had to flee overnight, a once unimaginable situation. And as a result of my family's experience, I don't take my freedoms and securities for granted. I'm a student of history and anti-Semitism, and I'm aware of how tenuous our safety is in society. Our campuses are supposedly bastions of free speech.
Not.
But are truly domains of preferred speech at best.
Yep.
I think you and I know very well that in the wake of George Floyd, if white nationalists decided to hold a rally at UCLA or Harvard, it would never be allowed. Yet these same elite institutions are allowing and often encouraging calls of protest for the slaughter and genocide of the Jewish people, chanting "River to the sea, Palestine will be free." These are the same people who so vocally demanded safe spaces for everyone and misgendering to be deemed a human rights violation. So I'm not surprised my account was taken down for sharing a list of students who were advocating for the death and destruction of the Jewish people. We're not talking about arguments over a two-state solution or political divisions of land. We're talking about Hamas. We're talking about terrorism, whose own charter calls for the extermination of the Jews. So I think the hypocrisy and lack of moral clarity on campuses and with administration is conscious or subconscious anti-Semitism, and we need to make sure these students pay a price and that their neighbors, friends, and employers know that they harbor these beliefs.
Yeah, that is David Duell, and telling Fox News and Neil Cavuto why it is and that he has no regret for leaking the names of those students that signed on to that anti-Israel pro-Palestine letter. And he's got a lot more to say. I've got another audio bite that I'm going to play coming for you next right here on Red Eye Radio. The phone number is 866-90 Red Eye, 866-907-3339.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. In for Gary and Eric. They return next Sunday night, Monday morning, and I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee. It starts in about a half hour, as a matter of fact. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You can find out more information about that show, including ways that you can listen at the website, 997WTN.com. I'm playing for you some audio from a guy by the name of David Duell. And he is one of these big-time CEOs. And he got his hands on the names of these students out there at Harvard University that were pro-Palestine, seemingly pro-Hamas, as some would say, and anti-Israel, and basically saying that Israel was responsible for what happened to them weekend before last. And so he got a hold of the names of the students. He got a hold of a list, and he leaked it on his LinkedIn. And then LinkedIn, of course, took it down, and they suspended his account. He says, though, that he has absolutely no regrets over doing it, and he feels like he was justified. One of the things, and based on what we were talking, I was speaking with folks earlier about this. We took some calls on it, and a lot of folks said, people need to know, if you're a CEO, you need to know what you're bringing into the company. And one guy sent me a note on Facebook Messenger, and he said, one thing that you're not considering, Mandis, and it was that some of these people that are brought into the company, like let's say, for example, the person comes in for an interview and you say, I see that you signed on to this letter, many years ago. Perhaps this is in the future, as this now far older adult is looking back and perhaps has changed that perspective. But if the CEO says, I'm going to take you at your word that you have changed your opinion on this situation involving Israel. Well, then what we're going to do is we're going to, bring you in, and then what happens if it turns out that they lied to get the job? And then they come in and they're, not only are they anti-Semitic, but they're also incredibly polarizing. I mean, let's face it, the office culture these days has become, in some instances, incredibly polarizing. I mean, people were told not to speak about politics. What happens if you hire someone who was anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and then you've got a whole bunch of Jewish folks that work for you? And then word leaks out that, this person's name was on this list from Harvard way back when. Well, now you've got a real problem on your hands. Still, other people said, yeah, but look at the precedent that you're setting. So are you now going to have and I reject this outright, but it is a good point. Some people are saying, okay, but what happens next? Like think about the slippery slope, right? The domino effect. So does that mean that we're now going to start having, say, for example, a litmus test to work for particular companies? Right now, the issue is Israel. Next time, it could be illegal immigration. Next time, it could be the Ukraine funding. And if you don't agree with all of these particular political viewpoints, well, then you're not going to work here. So where does it end? Especially in a country where we all do have a right to our opinion, as unpopular or wrong or wrong-headed as it may be. Now, I'm not much of a slippery slope guy. I'm just going to tell you. I don't scream slippery slope every time, one of these conversations comes up. But that is another side of the argument. That is something that you can say, okay, well, that might be worthy of a legit conversation. But you see, what happened in Israel is so incredibly horrific that I think that's why the majority of the American people are so unbelievably repulsed by what we saw and what we continue to see. And so this guy, David Duell, he says that he has absolutely no regrets with putting out these names. And he does feel like these students do need to be held accountable for their actions. He was in the midst of an interview with Neil Cavuto on Fox News, and it was a really good interview because, there's a lot of people that cannot stand what this guy did because it's an invasion of their privacy. And, of course, my question would be, listen, you put your name down on a piece of paper that took a very controversial opinion. It's a political opinion where you essentially sided with people who did abhorrent things, terrorists. So do you really think that you have a right to privacy in that sense? If you went public with your hatred of Israel, well, then that's out there for the world to see. And so David Duell continued on talking about how he had no regrets for releasing the names of these kids and or these young adults, and how he would do it again.
Nobody should be judged by the worst decision they made at their life. I've made a lot of stupid decisions in my life, but I think they have an opportunity to publicly renounce their support for terrorism and Jew hatred. And this is not about my personal not hiring of folks, because I'm a small impact, but ultimately about the broader community knowing who these people are, and for all employers, neighbors, and friends to know that these folks harbor these types of beliefs. At the end of the 20th century, 40% of university faculty and students in Vienna were Jews. That number went to 0, and they got killed in the Holocaust. I'm going to do my part to prevent this from happening again, and I felt the need to speak up, knowing full well that this would come at a financial and personal price. I've already received multiple threats, bombarded with hate messages, but history has shown that the price of inaction could be greater.
Yeah, so there you go. And it makes a lot of sense, and I do understand what he's saying. And so I think these schools, and we've all known that they were hotbeds for progressivism for years. I mean, we've been talking about what is going on these college campuses. And David Duell, he most certainly knows that as well. I have not heard of any of these students renouncing what they said in this letter. As a matter of fact, there's some that are, doubling down and tripling down. And I think this is going to be one of those stories that does have a very large impact on colleges moving forward. Because if you didn't believe that these were, bastions of just insane thought, well, I mean, now there really is no debate. I mean, there was a professor. His name is Russell Rickford, and he was, for whatever reason, he thought it would be a good idea to grab a microphone. He's at Cornell University, and there's video out there of him talking about the attacks on Israel, and this guy said that it was an exhilarating experience. Yeah, that's what he said.
It was exhilarating.
It's exhilarating, he says.
It was exhilarating. It was energizing.
It was exhilarating and energizing. By the way, I did tweet out the entire 2-minute plus video. It's terrible audio, as you can tell. But, I mean, again, a very controversial thing to say. Now, I know what some of you folks are thinking. We live in America, and everybody's got their right to free speech, their First Amendment right to free speech. And I totally and wholeheartedly agree. And the rest of America does have a right to react to what it is that people like Russell Rickford say. He is a history professor. And by the way, this guy was also in favor of defunding the police. Did call the Hamas terrorist attacks exhilarating and energizing at a pro-Palestine rally. And so now the question is there going to be anything that should happen to him? Should he lose his job? Should Cornell fire him? I think we all know that they won't fire him. But I can tell you that there's a lot of parents out there who are trying to decide what they want to do or where they want to send their kids to college. And maybe the question that I'll have for you folks tomorrow when I fill in for Gary and Eric, maybe the question that I'll have for you tomorrow is, okay, so UMass, Cornell, you've got Harvard and some other schools, UPenn as well. As you see all of this going on, is this impacting your decision to send your kids to college? Perhaps I'll have that to be the question that I ask tomorrow night right here on Red Eye Radio. 866-90 Red Eye, because I think there's a lot of people that are looking at these kinds of stories because, they're compounding. It's like every day there's another story of these just insane things that are happening in college campuses. And so I think that there's a lot of folks that are looking at this and thinking, man, I am paying a lot of money for this. 866-907-3339. This is Dan Mandis on Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90 Red Eye.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90. Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Let's say hello to Jerry calling from Chattanooga on Red Eye Radio. Jerry, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, it's all these kids that are, throwing their opinions out and trying to support Hamas and all that. I don't think they really understand the severity of the situation, and they don't, realize what these people are actually going through, and they're just trying to support something that's different. And if they were in their situation and they were being the ones over there, what, the Jewish people and stuff are going through, these Hamas terrorists, all they would look at the Americans is like dollar signs. So they're basically, even if they went over there trying to say that they supported them, they're going to think of them as, money, how much money can we get out of them? And if we can't get anything out of them, then they're going to end up like the unfortunate scenario of the rest of the Americans, and then they're going to end up killing them.
One of the things that I've thought about, Jerry, is, what would you do if you were a parent and you found out that, this is what your son or daughter thought about the situation in Israel, where they were, siding with the terrorists and they were anti-Israel? I mean, I would be heartbroken. And I'm assuming that if you have an adult son or daughter who's going to college, then by and large what their political beliefs are. I do believe that part of, and I think you're onto something, Jerry, and I did mention this earlier, I think part of what's going on is these kids may be engaged in some groupthink. They're in their college campus, and with groupthink, you don't question. You agree and accept what everybody else is saying around you. So if you're part of an anti-Israel, pro-Palestine group, and you join this group for whatever reason, and this happens, well, then you don't really fully comprehend how reprehensible that view is, where you're blaming Israel for what happened. And I think that if you remove these kids from the situation, they may at some point, realize, you know what, now that I've seen the videos and I realize how horrific this is, I've changed my mind on that. Because, people can't change their mind and they can't realize that they were wrong. I can only hope that some of these students do that. But if their name is on this letter that has now been released and is out there for the entire world to see, we do live in a world and a society, certainly here in America, as we know, and we do a lot of cancel culture. And that is part of what I love America, but I hate cancel culture in America because this is something that the left does. And so you have some people that are saying, well, you can't destroy their lives forever because of, one comment that they make. Well, guess what? They made the comment, oh, and by the way, the left does that to the right all the time. And I think one of the reasons why there is such a passionate response to this story earlier when we were talking about it is because, people like me and folks like you, we have all experienced cancel culture. Either we've been canceled, we've seen conservatives canceled, or we've been the victim of attempted cancel culture. So when you see those things happening and you understand what it means to have your career ruined, your life threatened, and your reputation completely tarnished because of these folks, well, then you don't have a lot of sympathy for someone on the other side who may be ultimately the victim of cancel culture from the right, because we know how it feels. And sadly, when it comes to cancel culture that comes from the left, there is no mercy.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.